So the Buffalo Sabres took a chance, brought in former Pittsburgh Penguins assistant general manager Jason Botterill to be the new general manager of the Buffalo Sabres. We're going to take a look at the timeline that Jason Botterill spent with the Buffalo Sabres, how it affects the Sabres moving forward after the firing of the general manager. We're going to be talking about that in this video. If you like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, you want to see the latest news around the NHL, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and to subscribe down below. Now let's take a look at the state of the Buffalo Sabres after the firing of general manager Jason Botterill. May 11th, 2017, the Buffalo Sabres named their 8th general manager in team history after 10 years in Pittsburgh with the Pittsburgh Penguins organization as a scout, a head scout, an assistant general manager, not to mention 3 Stanley Cups with the Pittsburgh Penguins there during his tenure. June 15th, a month later after his hiring, he hires Hall of Famer and former Buffalo Sabre Phil Housley to be the team's next head coach. There was obviously a lot of talk about that. Phil Housley coming back to Buffalo, it seemed like a good fit. He was more of a player's coach, and that would fit well with Jack Eichel, who was getting a little bit frustrated with what was going on there in Buffalo. Having a guy like Phil Housley could be a great addition there, and obviously Phil Housley knows the game very well and could be a legitimate head coach for the Buffalo Sabres. 2017 was a pretty solid draft for the Buffalo Sabres as they would be taking the Big Ten NCAA Minnesota Golden Gophers center at 8th overall, Casey Mittelstadt. There was a lot of hype around Casey Mittelstadt, the potential of being a top 6 forward at the NHL level. He was a pretty solid center. He was a little bit on the leaner side, and he really wasn't ready. He wasn't an NHL build right out of the gate. So he would have to spend some time in the NCAA, growing himself a little bit, getting a little bit bigger, adding some size, and obviously being ready to jump into the NHL. He had the raw talent, but he needed more time to develop. So now we get into October, the beginning of the season. As October 3rd, 2017, Jack Eichel signs an 8-year, $80 million contract with the Buffalo Sabres. So that is 8 years. You do the math, 8 years, $10 million per season for Jack Eichel, which looking back now and with the likely new CBA over the next couple of years will be a steal for the Buffalo Sabres. If he's still a Buffalo Sabre at that point, we'll be getting into that. But this is a great pickup for the Buffalo Sabres. They gave him a lot of money, but as the years go on, that will look better and better and better with Jack Eichel. And that was a big move by the Sabres getting that done. And the Pagulas, the ownership, had a lot to do with that signing. And Botterill kind of had his hands tied. He had to sign that contract with Jack Eichel. Now we move on to February 17th, 2018. So we had a little bit later into the beginning of the next year. The team was down 4-0 against the Los Angeles Kings as fans booed what was on the ice once again. And up in the press box, Jason Botterill slams the door of the press box suite and stormed down the hallway in frustration. So obviously, we're not even in a year into this process, and Jason Botterill is already frustrated with the product on the ice. Not to mention the hardcore Buffalo Sabre fans being very disappointed with what was going on over the past 2 decades with this Buffalo Sabres team, and it continues yet again this season here in 2018. Now we move on to April of 2018. The team is out of the playoffs. They're doing the locker cleanout, and we hear Jason Botterill come out. This isn't working, and we have a losing culture. And that was a big part, kind of what was already there. A lot of the talent was there, and we were going to see a lot of changes come to the Buffalo Sabres. Later that year, and also during this time, during the locker cleanouts, Ryan O'Reilly came out and was saying how he has sort of lost his love for the game of hockey in his time with Buffalo, and he's not happy with his situation. And this would lead later into the summer. We'll be talking about that in a minute. We head to June of 2018, June 22nd. The Buffalo Sabres win the draft lottery to select the superstar defenseman Swede coming out of Europe, Rasmus Dahlin. And this is where they really felt like they could turn the organization around, winning the draft lottery. They missed out on Connor McDavid a few years earlier, but they were going to be getting a big player here in Rasmus Dahlin at number 1 overall. Also on this day, they announced that Robin Lehner would indeed be walking away from the organization. The Buffalo Sabres were not going to give him a restricted tag. He was just going to walk in free agency on his own with no consequence. He was going to be able to look elsewhere outside of the organization after another pitiful season with the Buffalo Sabres. He came into Buffalo being the potential of being a starter with the Buffalo Sabres, and obviously things fell through, and he would inevitably get signed by the New York Islanders. And Islander fans remember how things went that first season with Lou Lamoriello and Barry Trotz at the helm with Robin Lehner. Now we get to July 1st, 2018, and this is really the beginning of the end for Jason Botterill, and we're only a year into this process, and things already didn't look good for Jason Botterill. The Buffalo Sabres trade Ryan O'Reilly to the St. Louis Blues in exchange for Patrick Berglund, Vladimir Sobotka, Tage Thompson, Ryan Johnston, a 2020 first-round pick, and a 2021 second-round pick, which the Buffalo Sabres are still paying this season. Or the St. Louis Blues will be giving this coming draft next year. So this was a big trade because Ryan O'Reilly, like I mentioned earlier, was at the locker cleanout, was saying he was not happy with the Buffalo Sabres. He was not happy with the state of the organization, and he was looking to just find a fresh start. He was really losing his love of hockey, and coincidentally, that whole story with Vladimir Sobotka, he left the Buffalo Sabres because he lost his love for the game. We hear this again and again and again out of Buffalo. Evander Kane kind of lost his love for the game, gets shipped out to Winnipeg. Then we see, actually he got shipped to San Jose. Then we see Robin Lehner, kind of lost his love of the game, goes to the Islanders. Bill Masterton, William N. Jennings. So this is the same story once again, and Ryan O'Reilly, we know how the story goes with Ryan O'Reilly that next season with the St. Louis Blues. I'll give you a hint. It ends with a Stanley Cup championship. So now we move on a month later. August 2nd, 2018, there was swirls that the Carolina Hurricanes knew they weren't going to be able to re-sign forward Jeff Skinner, and there was talk that they could be looking to make a trade for the young winger. Well, coincidentally enough, the Buffalo Sabres were in need of a winger, and they went to Carolina to look for a trade. The Carolina Hurricanes send Jeff Skinner to the Buffalo Sabres in a package. There was a couple of players, Cliff Pugh being one of them, I believe a third-round pick. So there were a couple of pieces in that deal, and a pretty solid trade at the time, really, for the Buffalo Sabres. They gave up a lot of secondary assets for one packaged up player in Jeff Skinner, and it looked like a pretty solid deal for the Buffalo Sabres. So now we move into November 27th, 2018. The Buffalo Sabres, this is pretty much the big moment for the Buffalo Sabres and Jason Botterill as the team goes on a 10-game winning streak, the longest since 1975, and would be the longest winning streak in the team's franchise history. And it looked like the Buffalo Sabres were getting things going. And not to mention the guy that got that OT winner for the 10-game winning streak, none other than Jason Botterill's newly acquired asset back in August, Jeff Skinner. Now we move on to April, as the Buffalo Sabres, yet again, same old story. They start off the season hot, they fall out after Christmas, and they're tanking again. Out of the playoffs once again. Housley, on April 6, 2019, asked if he would remain the head coach of the Buffalo Sabres. His answer? Yes, I do. Well, that's pretty much putting the nail in the coffin because you know how the story goes. April 7th, 2019, Phil Housley is fired as head coach of the Buffalo Sabres. So a day later, he's let go by the Sabres after saying he feels confident he will be with the Sabres next season. Yeah, no. Then, a month later, May 14th, 2019, Ralph Kruger, after a little bit of a search by Botterill out in Slovakia, he finds Ralph Kruger, who was the former head coach of the Edmonton Oilers during the oil change. Yeah, you got to look up that series on YouTube. It's incredible. But Ralph Kruger was the head coach, and he's a pretty solid head coach overall. He's done well in Europe as well. And he's actually, I believe, an owner for like a soccer team over there. He's an interesting story. But Ralph Kruger is named the next head coach there with the Buffalo Sabres in May. A month later, June 7th, 2019, the Buffalo Sabres have some interesting, debacles with Jeff Skinner, as he is a pending unrestricted free agent. They didn't trade him at the trade deadline. They kind of had their hands tied, and they could not afford to lose him in July of that season to free agency. So what did the Buffalo Sabres do? They signed Jeff Skinner to an 8-year, $72 million contract. That did not age well, because a year later, here in 2020, he did not have a good season, to say the least, in 2020 with the Buffalo Sabres. So we'll be talking about that. Now we move on to May 27th, 2020. So almost a year later, and this is kind of this is really the end point of the Buffalo Sabres. They start out of the gate with Ralph Kruger. Things look solid. They're playing well. Jack Eichel is in the nomination for the Hart Trophy for most of the way. And boom, December hits. Buffalo Sabres fall apart. Goaltending, just Carter Hutton, who they brought in from St. Louis, just not working for whatever reason. Linus Ullmark goes down with injury, and the Buffalo Sabres are toast yet again. They did it once again, where they start off the season strong. The fans finally, this is the year, and they do it again, and they drop it right out of a hat. They drop the season once again. So now we are in May 27th, 2020. Obviously, the pandemic hits. The last game that we saw out of Jason Botterill, I believe, was a shootout loss against the Pittsburgh Penguins. Quite frankly, it's interesting because that's the team that he left the Buffalo Sabres for. Botterill believes the team needs to learn to win the right way in Rochester before coming to the Sabres. That's really what it came down to for Botterill. He really felt like just things were not working with Botterill, and things just really weren't working with Botterill, and I think people started to realize. I mean, if you look at videos in the beginning of this year, Sam Reinhart came out and he was disappointed with how things had gone with the Buffalo Sabres. Rasmus Ristolainen pretty much throughout most of the season pretty much had his bags packed most of the year, it seemed like, because he'd always come out saying, I'm probably the next one to go. I've been here the longest out of most of these players, and if you're not the answer or the solution, you need to get traded. And that's kind of how Ristolainen, he's been in limbo now for probably a year. I think Sabres fans like seeing Ristolainen there. I hope he sticks around with the Buffalo Sabres. I think he's done really well there, especially this past season. But he is a big name that has been talked about in possible trade rumors. I wonder what a new general manager would think of with Ristolainen. That would be definitely interesting to see, specifically this summer. But the Buffalo Sabres, and then Jack Eichel coming out saying he's disappointed. Rasmus Dahlin showing a little bit of sour grapes toward the Montreal Canadiens, who barely got in ahead of them in the 2014 playoff format. Eichel obviously frustrated that his team can't even make it in a best of 16. Now you've got 24 teams making the playoffs, and his team still could not make the playoffs. So the Buffalo Sabres were quite disappointed once again. Now, there's a big task ahead for the management for the Buffalo Sabres this year, because you have some pretty big names you have to re-sign. At the beginning of the year, there was a lot of talk of Rookie of the Year, or the Calder Trophy for Victor Olofsson, who came out on the scene out of nowhere, had a really solid season on the first line with the Buffalo Sabres. Jack Eichel, and then obviously you have Sam Reinhart, who had a solid season as well. He has to be re-signed this offseason as well, and he's probably going to make some pretty solid money. And especially right now with the state Buffalo's in, he's probably going to get paid some pretty solid money as well. So now we look at June 16th, 2020. The ownership does a vote of confidence after making a vote, and they believed that it was best to let go of and officially announce the firing of Jason Botterill. Kevin Adams named as the new general manager, the ninth in franchise history for the Buffalo Sabres. Now, this is a little snippet here from a John Vogel quote. We see, while Botterill was the marquee name in the bloodletting, he was just the start. Hardly a soul was saved as the Pagulas fired the assistant general managers, the minor league coaching staff, scouting directors, scouts, and player development coaches. Now remember that guy I was talking about earlier, Casey Mittelstadt. Where is he? We didn't even talk about him throughout most of this video. He was a top draft pick. Well, he spent a lot of the season in Rochester with the Rochester Americans. Didn't really get a ton of playing time with the Buffalo Sabres this season. And like I said earlier, we talked about Botterill earlier this last month, talking about how he wants to see the Buffalo Sabres, really developing in Rochester. And I think Buffalo fans had enough. They were like, all right, this is ridiculous. You're more worried about Rochester succeeding than the franchise that we have now. We have Jack Eichel. We have one of the best players in the world that is playing hockey in Jack Eichel, and we're worried about what the Rochester Americans are doing down in the American Hockey League. I think really there was a lot of disappointment there. The lack of development of players as well. Rasmus Dahlin was a gift to them. They really didn't have to develop him all that much. He's just raw skill. We know how good he is. Casey Mittelstadt just never developed the way they had hoped. Maybe he could do that soon. You had Jeff Skinner, who just can't play the wing. He really struggled this season. At times on the bench, you could watch him, and he was just looking up at the sky and probably wondering, the money's good, but why did I sign for an 8-year deal with this Buffalo Sabres mess? He has to be wondering to himself, was it worth the money, or would I rather make less money playing on a winning team where I'm actually scoring in the top 6? Because there were times this season where Jeff Skinner was in the bottom 6 forward group for the Buffalo Sabres, and that just makes no sense. They just signed him to an 8-year, $52 million contract. There's no reason he should be in the bottom 6. I think Buffalo Sabres fans have shown more than enough frustration for the organization, and now Kevin Adams has a huge task ahead of him. And I think the number one thing for the Buffalo Sabres, well, really two big things. You've got the center, you have Jack Eichel, but really building a core around that. Tage Thompson as well. Is he going to develop into a top 6 center? Casey Mittelstadt, one of those guys has to hit. Not to mention, they also have Dylan Cozens, who looks very promising. And of course, if you look back at that draft, when they selected Dylan Cozens, they were talking about Botterill has to make this pick. This is a big pick for the Sabres. Obviously, with the Ryan O'Reilly trade, seeing him with all those trophies, if you actually watch that, it was quite interesting, and it kind of led to what we're seeing today. Really what it came down to, and this is from another source, that the Pagulas were not able to let Botterill live down that O'Reilly trade, and that really sunk any chance of Jason Botterill really becoming much of anything. And that really, that trade is really the pinpoint. But even you look at the San Jose Shark trades where they made with Evander Kane, they didn't even get a first-round pick for Evander Kane, and it just seemed very odd, some of the moves that Botterill was making, and it just didn't seem like it was working. Now, he did make a solid trade, picking up Henry Jokiharju from the Chicago Blackhawks when he traded Alex Nylander out to Chicago. I think that trade has worked pretty well for both sides, but Henry Jokiharju is a big piece of that defense moving forward, and maybe makes a guy like Ristolainen more available on the market. But they also added guys like Josh Manson and just Brandon Montour, not Josh Manson. I get those mixed up sometimes. But the Buffalo Sabres it's going to be interesting. Kevin Adams has his hands full. You've got prospects that you need to develop, guys like Dylan Cozens, Casey Mittelstadt, and it's going to be interesting because they have a lot of pending free agents this year. Did the Buffalo Sabres just kind of start from scratch and just look to retool on the fly here with a quick couple of big free agent acquisitions? Is maybe that the best route for the Buffalo Sabres? Did they make a couple of trades to maybe try and change some things in the organization? They've got a pretty solid blue line, and that's why I think the Ristolainen talk has been out there, because they need some winger depth, specifically with that Jack Eichel line, and I think we could very likely see a deal where that comes into fruition. I think, honestly, they had Sam Reinhart on the top 6. I believe Reinhart, Olofsson and Eichel down the middle. That's a pretty solid first line, and you need one of Dylan Cousins or Casey Middlestat or Tage Thompson, one of those three guys to develop and become that second line center and really start to build the pieces for this team. And the wingers is going to be an issue. I mean, you look at some of these guys they are paying. Kyle Oposo, a great player. I loved him as a New York Islander. A great person. He's had a lot to go through with treatments and stuff like that. He's been very sick. So, you give him a little bit of a pass, but still, he's making, I believe, $6 or $7 million for the next 2 or 3 years. It's just a lot. And the Buffalo Sabres, who are in a win now mode, that's a top 6 center that you could pay, or a top 6 winger you could pay that $6 or $7 million, and you're paying it to Kyle Oposo, who was in and out of the lineup for a large portion of this season. So obviously now Jimmy Vesey seems like he'll be leaving the team as well. Just a lot of missteps for the Buffalo Sabres. They need to fix the goaltending as well, and I wonder if when they go up to the draft floor, do they maybe move up to pick up a guy like Yaroslav Askarov, or if he falls into their lap? Is that something that the Buffalo Sabres would look at just to change this organization around? They've got some solid pieces. I really believe if they draft a goaltender at Askarov, that could be a huge pickup for the Buffalo Sabres. So leave in the comment section down below, what do you think Kevyn Adams, his first big assignment will be for this Buffalo Sabres team? Obviously, I think it's going to be signing Olofsson and Sam Reinhart, but he's got a lot of pieces there in Buffalo. Does he move Middlestat? Does he move a guy like Ristolainen? How does he try and get rid of get himself out of the Carter Hutton, contract? Is Linus Ullmark the starting goaltender moving forward for the Buffalo Sabres? Leave that in the comment section down below. And if you like what we're doing here at Goal Line Hockey, want to see the latest news around the NHL, make sure to give this video a thumbs up and a subscribe down below. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.